mother bear collapsed outside the home. Parents refused to help this bear. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the small yard of the Harper family's cottage. Emma and Noah Harper moved about their kitchen with practiced ease, the familiar rhythm of their morning routine providing comfort against the wilderness that surrounded their home. Their cottage sat at the edge of a dense forest, the boundary between civilization and nature as thin as the wooden fence that marked their property line. Their 8-month-old daughter, Lily, sat contentedly on a quilt spread across the living room floor. Her tiny fingers reached for colorful blocks, stacking them with determination before gleefully knocking them down. Her giggles filled the cozy space, a melody that made Emma smile as she prepared breakfast. "Coffee's ready," Noah called, pouring the steaming liquid into Emma's favorite mug. "Think we should take Lily for a walk later? Weather looks perfect." Emma nodded, glancing out the kitchen window at the clear blue sky. "That would be nice. We could." Her words died in her throat as movement at the edge of their yard caught her eye. Something large and dark stumbled through the tall grass. Noah followed her gaze, the coffee pot slipping from his fingers and clattering on the counter. "Emma," he whispered, his voice tight with fear, "that's a bear." It wasn't just any bear, it was a massive mother bear, her coat a rich brown that gleamed in the morning light. But something was wrong. The bear moved erratically, her powerful body swaying as though fighting to remain upright. Emma and Noah watched in horrified fascination as the creature dragged herself toward their yard, each step seemingly more difficult than the last. With a sound that was half groan, half whimper, the bear collapsed just outside their fence, her massive body heaving with labored breaths. Even from inside, they could see the intelligence in her eyes and the unmistakable plea for help. "Noah, she's hurt," Emma whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. "Should we call someone? Animal control?" "Don't get any closer," Noah warned, moving to close the curtains. "Bears are unpredictable, especially if they're injured." His voice dropped lower. "Where's Lily?" They both turned to find their daughter had abandoned her blocks. The baby had pulled herself up using the furniture and was now pressed against the large picture window, her small palms flat against the glass. Her wide blue eyes were fixed on the suffering animal outside, as though she understood something her parents couldn't grasp. "Bah," Lily said softly, a sound between a babble and a word. She pointed one chubby finger toward the bear. "Bah, huh." Emma quickly scooped a Lily into her arms, pulling her away from the window. "No, sweetie, that's dangerous. That's a bear." She turned to Noah, who was already dialing on his phone. "Who are you calling?" "Animal control," he replied tersely. "They need to come tranquilize it and move it back into the forest. It shouldn't be this close to homes." Outside, the bear released another mournful sound, her eyes seeming to search the cottage windows. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as those intelligent eyes appeared to lock with hers for just a moment. "They said it'll be at least an hour before anyone can get here," Noah said, hanging up. "We're supposed to stay inside and keep all doors and windows locked." Emma nodded, but something about the situation felt wrong. The bear wasn't acting aggressively. She wasn't trying to break in or find food. She had deliberately come to their yard as if seeking something. Help, perhaps? Lily squirmed in Emma's arms, her little body twisting as she tried to return to the window. "Bah!" she insisted again, louder this time. "Bah, huh!" "She's fixated on the bear," Emma whispered, struggling to hold on to her increasingly agitated daughter. "Lily, no! We have to stay away." Noah peeked through the curtains again. "The Wilsons are outside. I should warn them." He cracked open the front door and called out to their neighbors who were walking their dog along the road. "Hey, there's a bear in our yard. You might want to head back inside." The elderly couple looked alarmed, quickening their pace as they hurried back toward their own cottage. Noah closed and locked the door firmly. "Do you think we should try to help it?" Emma asked hesitantly, bouncing Lily in her arms to quiet her growing fussiness. Noah shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. That's a wild animal, Emma. It could kill us all in seconds if it wanted to." He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. The safest thing for everyone, including the bear, is to let the professionals handle it. Emma nodded, knowing he was right, but something about the bear's eyes haunted her. Outside, the creature's breathing seemed to be growing more labored, each inhale a visible struggle that made her massive ribcage expand painfully. "Bah-huh!" Lily cried again, tears welling in her eyes as she reached toward the window. Her little face crumpled with an emotion that seemed far too complex for her age, not fear, but something like concern. The family huddled together in their living room, the peaceful morning shattered by the unexpected visitor. The bear's labored breathing created a rhythmic backdrop to their tense silence, each wondering what would happen next. None of them could have predicted how this standoff would end, or the extraordinary moment of connection that was about to unfold on this ordinary day. Emma paced nervously by the window, peeking through the gap in the curtains every few seconds. "Noah, she looks worse," she whispered, her voice catching. "I think she might be dying." Noah joined her at the window, his jaw tight with tension. The bear's massive head now rested on the ground, her eyes half closed. A small puddle had formed beneath her muzzle. Water, or perhaps saliva, Emma couldn't tell from this distance, but what caught her attention was the strange bulge along the bear's side that seemed to move independently. "Noah," Emma gasped, grabbing his arm, "I think she's pregnant. Look at her belly. Something's moving in there." Noah squinted, then drew back sharply. "You're right. That could explain why she came here. Animals sometimes seek out humans when they're in distress." He ran his hands through his hair, indecision written across his face. "But that doesn't change anything, Emma. If anything, it makes her more dangerous. A mother protecting her unborn cubs." A sharp knock at their door made them both jump. Through the peephole, Noah saw their neighbor, Marcus Chen, standing on their porch with binoculars hanging around his neck. Marcus was the local veterinarian, though he mainly treated domestic animals. Noah cracked open the door. "Marcus, there's a bear in our yard." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice calm but urgent. "Mrs. Wilson called me. I've been watching from my deck." He gestured to the binoculars. "That bear is in labor, Noah. And she's in trouble." Emma joined them at the door, still clutching Lily, who had grown quieter, her little face solemn, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. "Can you help her, Marcus?" The veterinarian's face was grim. Bears don't usually approach humans unless they're desperate. "My guess is she's been in labor for hours, maybe even days. There's likely a complication." He hesitated. "I've called wildlife services, but they're stretched thin with a forest fire in the north. It'll be at least 3 hours before they can get here." "3 hours?" Emma echoed. "But you just said—" "She won't last 3 hours," Marcus confirmed quietly. "Not like this." Noah's expression hardened. "What are you suggesting, Marcus? That we go out there and deliver bear cubs? That's insane." "I'm not asking you to do anything," Marcus replied evenly. "But I've treated injured wildlife before as a stopgap measure. I have equipment in my truck. I can at least try to help her until professionals arrive." His eyes moved to Lily, who was watching him with those solemn blue eyes. "Sometimes compassion requires calculated risk, Noah." Noah shook his head firmly. "Number, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't let you endanger yourself on our property." His voice lowered. "And I won't risk my family." Marcus nodded slowly, disappointment evident in his eyes. "I understand. I'll keep watch from my property then." He turned to leave, but paused. "Just so you know, black bears rarely attack humans. They're usually more afraid of us than we are of them." After Marcus left, Emma turned to Noah, conflict evident in her expression. "Noah, we can't just let her die out there." "We're not equipped to help, Emma," Noah snapped, then immediately softened his tone when Lily's lip began to tremble. "I'm sorry, what if something goes wrong? What if she attacks? I'm thinking of you and Lily." Emma nodded, understanding his fear because she shared it. But something about the situation felt wrong. Standing safely inside while a creature suffered just beyond their fence. It went against everything they had taught each other about kindness, about the responsibility that came with sharing this wild space. Lily had grown eerily quiet in Emma's arms, her eyes still fixed on the window. When Emma tried to move her to the kitchen, away from the sight of the suffering bear, Lily began to wail. Not her usual fussy cry, but a heart-wrenching sound that made both parents freeze. "Bah-huh?" Lily sobbed, reaching toward the window with such desperation that Emma nearly lost her grip on the squirming child. "Bah-huh?" "She really wants to see the bear," Noah said softly, bewildered by their daughter's intense reaction. "I've never seen her like this." Outside, the bear released a long, low moan that seemed to ripple through the very walls of their cottage. Emma and Noah exchanged looks, a wordless communication born of years together. In that moment, something shifted. "Maybe Marcus is right," Emma suggested cautiously. "Maybe we could just let him try. We could stay inside with Lily, keep the doors locked. If anything seems dangerous." Noah paced the room, conflict evident in every line of his body. Finally, he stopped and looked at his wife and daughter. "Let me think about it," he said. "Give me a few minutes." But they didn't have minutes to spare. The bear's cries grew more pitiful, and Lily's distress escalated in tandem, as though the two were somehow connected. Emma found herself wondering if babies, still so new to the world, could sense things adults had forgotten how to feel. A movement outside caught her attention. Through the window, she spotted Marcus Chen kneeling beside his truck, pulling out what looked like medical supplies. He had clearly decided to approach the bear, with or without their permission. "Noah," Emma called urgently. "Marcus is going to try anyway." Noah rushed to the window just in time to see their neighbor slowly approaching the fence, a large bag in one hand and what appeared to be a tranquilizer gun in the other. His movements were careful, measured, his focus entirely on the laboring bear. "That fool is going to get himself killed," Noah muttered, but there was more fear than anger in his voice now. He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling 911. But before he could dial, another sound cut through the tense atmosphere, the unmistakable rumble of an engine, growing louder by the second. Emma moved to the front window and gasped at what she saw. "Noah, it's hunters," she said, horror evident in her voice. "2 trucks. They have rifles." Sure enough, 2 mud-splattered pickup trucks had pulled up along the road, and 4 men were climbing out, each armed with hunting rifles. One of them, a tall man with a beard and camouflage jacket, called out to Marcus. "Step away from the bear, Doc." Mrs. Wilson called us too, said there was a dangerous animal threatening the neighborhood. Marcus stood his ground between the bear and the hunters. "This bear isn't threatening anyone, Dale. She's in labor and needs medical attention, not bullets." The man named Dale snorted. "A suffering bear is a dangerous bear. Better to put it down humanely than risk it attacking someone." He raised his rifle slightly. "Now, move aside. We know what we're doing." Noah watched the standoff, his heart racing. The hunters were technically within their rights. In this rural area, dangerous wildlife could be eliminated if they posed a threat to human safety. But this bear wasn't threatening anyone. She had come seeking help. "I have to stop this," Noah said suddenly, moving toward the door. Emma caught his arm. "What? But you said—" "I know what I said," Noah replied, his voice firm. "But I was wrong. Marcus is right. This isn't about a wild animal anymore. It's about doing what's right." He looked at Lily, who had suddenly grown calm, watching her father with those wise blue eyes. "It's about the world we want to show our daughter." Before Emma could respond, Noah was out the door, jogging toward the growing confrontation between Marcus and the hunters. Emma moved to the window. Lily clutched tightly in her arms, her heart in her throat as she watched her husband step into potential danger. "Dale, wait," Noah called as he approached. "This is my property, and I'm asking you to stand down." The bearded hunter turned, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Harper, your wife called my wife about a dangerous bear. We're just trying to help." "We appreciate that," Noah said carefully, moving to stand beside Marcus. "But Dr. Chen believes there's a way to help this bear without killing her. She's in labor, Dale. She came to us because she needs help, not because she's looking to attack." Dahl lowered his rifle slightly, uncertainty crossing his face. "A bear in labor is still dangerous, Harper. More dangerous even." "I know the risks," Noah replied steadily, "but I'm willing to take them. This is my land, and I'm asking you to give Dr. Chen a chance to help her." The standoff lasted several tense moments, during which the bear released another painful moan. Finally, Dale sighed and lowered his rifle completely. "Your call, Harper. But we're staying right here in case things go south." He gestured to his companions, who reluctantly lowered their weapons but remained vigilant. Noah nodded his thanks, then turned to Marcus. "What do you need?" Relief washed over the veterinarian's face. "I need space to work, and maybe an extra pair of hands. I have painkillers that should be safe for her, and some basic equipment. But bear births are not exactly my specialty." Noah nodded, glancing back at the cottage where Emma stood watching, Lily in her arms. He gave them a reassuring wave, though his heart was hammering in his chest. What had seemed so clear-cut an hour ago, stay away from the dangerous wild animal, now felt like a more complex moral calculation. As Marcus carefully approached the bear, talking in soft, reassuring tones, Noah followed a few steps behind. The bear's enormous head lifted slightly, her dark eyes registering their presence. But instead of aggression, Noah saw only exhaustion and what looked uncannily like relief in those intelligent eyes. "Easy now," Marcus murmured, kneeling beside the massive creature. "We're here to help you, Mama." He turned to Noah. "Hold this bag open for me. I need to get some fluids into her first." Noah did as instructed, watching in astonishment as Marcus deftly inserted an IV line into the bear's foreleg, the huge animal offering no resistance. "She's so calm," Noah whispered. "It's like she knows." "Animals are more intuitive than we give them credit for," Marcus replied, working quickly to set up a makeshift treatment area. "She sought out humans deliberately. some part of her knew we could help. Inside the cottage, Emma watched the scene unfold with bated breath, torn between fear for her husband and pride in his courage. Lily had grown remarkably calm, her eyes never leaving the drama playing out in their yard. "Your daddy is very brave," Emma whispered to her daughter, "but also a little bit crazy." She hesitated, then made a decision. "Would you like to watch from closer?" Emma knew it was probably foolish, but something told her that Lily needed to see this. Carefully, she carried Lily onto their covered porch, staying well back, but giving them a better view of Noah and Marcus working together to help the laboring bear. The hunters remained at a distance, rifles lowered but ready, watching the proceedings with a mixture of skepticism and grudging respect. From the porch, Emma could hear Marcus's voice giving Noah instructions, could see her husband's focused expression as he assisted the veterinarian. The bear's massive body shuddered with contractions, and Marcus worked with quiet efficiency, occasionally administering what Emma assumed were medications through the IV line. "Something's wrong," Marcus said, loudly enough for Emma to hear. "The first cub is in the wrong position. I need to try to turn it, but she might react when I do." Noah nodded grimly. "Tell me what to do." "Be ready to move back quickly if she lashes out," Marcus instructed. "But keep talking to her. She seems to respond to human voices." Noah began speaking in a low, gentle tone, words Emma couldn't quite make out from where she stood. Whatever he was saying, it seemed to be working. The bear remained still as Marcus performed what looked like an extremely difficult procedure. Suddenly, Lily began squirming in Emma's arms, pointing and making excited sounds. "Bah, bah," she babbled, with such insistence that Emma nearly lost her grip. Before Emma realized what was happening, Lily had wriggled free and tumbled onto the porch floor. And then, in a heart-stopping moment that Emma would later describe as the longest second of her life, Lily did something impossible. She pushed herself up and took her very first steps. "Noah!" Emma screamed, lunging forward. But it was too late. Lily, who had never walked before, was toddling with surprising steadiness down the porch steps and across the yard toward the bear, Noah, and Marcus. Time seemed to slow. Emma ran after her daughter, but Lily had a head start. The hunters raised their rifles instinctively, and Marcus looked up from his work, his face freezing in horror as he saw the baby approaching. Noah turned, saw his daughter, and moved to intercept her, but he was on the wrong side of the bear. "Lily, no!" Emma cried, still several steps behind her surprisingly fast daughter. But Lily continued her determined march toward the bear, a smile of pure joy on her face. "Bah!" she called happily, as though greeting an old friend. And then, something extraordinary happened. The bear, in the midst of her labor pains, lifted her massive head and made a soft chuffing sound, not a growl, not a roar, but almost a greeting. Her dark eyes fixed on the approaching baby with what looked impossibly like recognition. Noah had nearly reached Lily when he faltered, watching in disbelief as his daughter fearlessly approached the wild animal. Something in the bear's demeanor stopped him from snatching her away immediately. There was no aggression, no threat in the bear's posture despite her pain. "Bah," Lily said again, and to everyone's astonishment she reached out and gently placed her tiny hand on the bear's nose. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Emma stopped running, her hand over her mouth. The hunters stood frozen, rifles half raised. Marcus paused mid-procedure, watching with wide eyes. Noah hovered just behind his daughter, ready to grab her at the first sign of danger. But there was no danger. The bear made another soft sound, almost like a sigh, and gently, ever so gently, she bumped her nose against Lily's small hand, as if returning the greeting. In that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere. The fear that had gripped them all seemed to dissipate like morning mist, replaced by a sense of wonder that was almost tangible. Emma walked forward slowly to join her family, tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't have explained exactly why she was crying. "It's a miracle," Marcus whispered, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I've never seen anything like it." Even the hunters lowered their rifles completely, the bearded man named Dale removing his hat in what seemed like an unconscious gesture of respect. And in the midst of this extraordinary moment of connection between a human child and a wild creature, Marcus noticed something else. "The cub," he said suddenly. "It's moving. The position has corrected itself." Sure enough, within minutes, the first tiny bear cub emerged, followed shortly by a second, and then a third. The mother bear, despite her exhaustion, immediately began cleaning her newborns with long, gentle licks, while Lily watched in fascination, still standing fearlessly close. Noah finally picked up his daughter, but he didn't move away immediately. Instead, he knelt beside the mother bear, allowing Lily to continue watching the new family from the safety of his arms. "Thank you," he said softly to the bear, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a wild animal, yet somehow certain she understood. "Thank you for trusting us." The mother bear looked up from her cubs, her intelligent eyes meeting Noah's for a long moment. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, she gently nudged one of her cubs toward Lily and Noah, not close enough to touch, but as if offering them a glimpse, a private viewing of her new family. Emma joined them, kneeling beside her husband and daughter, reaching out to take Noah's hand. Together, they watched the new bear family in reverent silence, witnesses to both the brutal reality of nature and its indescribable beauty. Behind them, Dale cleared his throat gruffly. "Well," he said, his voice unusually soft, "I reckon my work here is done." He turned to his companions. "Let's go, boys. Seems like this situation is well in hand." As the hunters departed, Marcus continued to monitor the mother bear, ensuring that all 3 cubs were healthy and nursing properly. "She'll need rest," he explained to Noah and Emma, "but I think she'll be fine now. Wildlife Services can help relocate them once they arrive." The Harpers nodded, still too overcome with emotion to speak much. Lily, however, continued to babble happily, pointing at the cubs with obvious delight. "She took her first steps," Emma said finally, her voice thick with tears, "to go to the bear. She's never walked before today." Noah wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, his own eyes damp. "She knew," he said simply. "Somehow she knew the bear needed help, and she wasn't afraid." He looked at his tiny daughter with new eyes, wondering what other wisdom she carried that adults had long forgotten. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across their yard, the Harpers remained beside their unusual visitor, a silent promise passing between species, a promise of protection, of respect, of the unexpected connections that can form when fear gives way to compassion. News of the event spread quickly through their small community. Neighbors who had initially stayed away out of fear began to approach cautiously, bearing blankets, water, even a few fish from a recent catch that Marcus suggested might help the mother bear regain her strength. What had begun as a morning of fear had transformed into something else entirely, a reminder that compassion could transcend species, that courage could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the purest wisdom came from those who had not yet learned to fear the unknown. As twilight approached, Wildlife Services finally arrived, their trucks rumbling down the gravel road. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, looking surprised at the scene that greeted them. A family sitting peacefully near a mother bear, and her cubs, surrounded by neighbors who had brought supplies and were keeping a respectful distance. "Well, this isn't what we expected to find," said the lead officer, a woman with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of decades in the field. She introduced herself as Ranger Sullivan. "We got calls about a dangerous bear situation." Marcus stood to greet her, explaining everything that had happened. Ranger Sullivan listened intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement as he described Lily's interaction with the bear. "In 30 years working with wildlife, I've never heard anything quite like this," she admitted, kneeling to examine the mother bear, who was now resting more comfortably, her cubs nursing at her side. She should be aggressive, protective of her newborns, yet she's completely calm around all of you. Noah, who hadn't left the bear's side for hours, nodded. It's like she knows we're trying to help. He glanced at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep in Emma's arms after the excitement. "Our daughter knew it first, before any of us." Ranger Sullivan studied the bear family thoughtfully. "We'd normally relocate them deeper into the forest preserve, away from human habitation." She hesitated. "But this mother is still weak from the difficult birth. Moving her now could be risky." "She can stay here," Noah said without hesitation, surprising even himself with the certainty in his voice. "We have the space. Marcus can continue to monitor her health, and once she's stronger, you can help relocate them if necessary." Emma nodded in agreement, though a flicker of concern crossed her face. "Is that safe for the bears and for us?" Ranger Sullivan considered this. "It's unusual but not unprecedented, in fact." She trailed off, a strange expression crossing her face as she studied the mother bear more closely. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the bear's left ear. With careful movements, she examined what appeared to be a small tag, partially hidden in the bear's fur. "I thought so," she said, her voice suddenly thick with emotion. "This bear has a history with humans." The Harpers and Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. Ranger Sullivan pulled out her tablet and began searching through records. "Bear number 247, she read. "Tagged 5 years ago as part of our rehabilitation program." She looked up, her eyes bright with realization. This bear was rescued as a cub after her mother was killed by poachers. She was hand-raised at our wildlife sanctuary before being released back into the wild. "She was raised by humans," Emma whispered, understanding dawning. "That's why she came here. She remembered that humans had helped her before." Ranger Sullivan nodded. "It would explain her unusual behavior. Bears have remarkable memories, especially regarding places of safety." She scrolled through more records. According to this, she was particularly bonded with the sanctuary staff. One of our junior rangers at the time named her Hope. "Hope," Noah repeated softly, looking at the bear with new understanding. "It fits." A light rain began to fall as evening deepened, but no one moved to leave. Instead, Marcus helped the rangers set up a temporary shelter over Hope and her cubs. A tarp stretched between trees to keep them dry while still allowing them freedom of movement. "We'll need to set some boundaries," Ranger Sullivan explained as they worked. "For the bears' safety as much as yours. They can't become too dependent on humans, or they'll never survive in the wild." Noah agreed, though he felt an unexpected pang at the thought of Hope eventually leaving. In just one day, this wild creature had changed something fundamental in his understanding of the world and his place in it. As the makeshift shelter was completed, Emma approached with a now awake Lily. The baby immediately brightened at the sight of Hope, reaching out those small hands again. "Bah," she exclaimed happily. "She's trying to say bear." Emma explained to Ranger Sullivan, who watched with fascination as Lily strained toward the bear family. Children often have a special connection with animals, the ranger observed, but this is something else entirely. Under the watchful eyes of the adults, Emma carefully allowed Lily to sit near Hope again. The mother bear lifted her massive head, acknowledging the baby's presence with a gentle rumble that seemed almost like a greeting. "It's as if they're communicating," Marcus whispered, watching the interspecies interaction with wonder. Lily babbled happily, pointing at the cubs with obvious delight. One of the tiny bears, bolder than its siblings, wiggled away from its mother and took a few wobbly steps toward Lily before tumbling onto its round belly. The baby giggled, a sound of such pure joy that even the rangers couldn't help smiling. "We should name them," Noah suggested, surprising himself again. When had he started thinking of these wild creatures as something more than temporary visitors? "That one's definitely brave," Emma said, pointing to the bold cub that had approached Lily, "and the one with the white mark on its chest could be Star." "And the smallest one?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the third cub, which seemed content to stay tucked against its mother's warm side. Lily chose that moment to offer her opinion. "Lily," she said clearly, her first real word. Everyone stared at the baby in astonishment. "Did she just—" Noah began. "I think she's naming the bear after herself," Emma said, tears springing to her eyes. "Lily." And so the bear family received their names: Hope, Brave, Star, and little Lily. As darkness fell completely, the rangers prepared to leave, promising to return in the morning with more supplies and to begin creating a proper monitoring plan for the unusual situation. "This will be a first for our department," Ranger Sullivan admitted as she packed up her equipment. "A semi-supervised wild bear family temporarily residing on private property. There will be protocols to establish, documentation to complete." She smiled wryly. "And a lot of explaining to do to my superiors." "We'll do whatever is needed," Noah assured her. "This feels important somehow, beyond just helping one bear family." The ranger nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes nature sends us messengers to remind us of what we've forgotten." She glanced at Lily, who was still watching the bears with rapt attention. "Your daughter is special. Not many would approach a wild bear without fear." "She didn't know to be afraid," Emma said quietly. "I wonder how much wisdom we lose when we learn to fear everything we don't understand." As the rangers departed and their neighbors reluctantly returned to their homes, the Harpers prepared to spend their first night as unofficial bear guardians. Marcus had agreed to stay in their guest room, both to monitor Hope's condition and to provide an extra set of hands if needed. The evening brought its own unexpected challenges. The Wilsons, who had initially called both Marcus and the hunters, arrived with a casserole and profuse apologies. "We didn't know she was in labor," Mrs. Wilson explained contritely. "We just saw a bear and panicked." She peered anxiously toward the makeshift shelter in the yard, where Hope and her cubs were now resting. "Dale feels terrible about nearly shooting her. He's always been a conservation hunter. Never takes more than his family needs, respects the wildlife. This has shaken him." "He helped in the end," Noah assured her, accepting the casserole with gratitude. "That's what matters." After the Wilsons left, the Harpers and Marcus sat on the porch, eating the chicken casserole and watching the occasional movements under the tarp as Hope tended to her cubs. Lily had finally been persuaded to go to sleep, though not without prolonged protests and repeated attempts to escape her crib to return to her bears. "What do you think will happen?" Emma asked softly, leaning against Noah's shoulder. "After Hope recovers, I mean." Noah considered this, watching the gentle rise and fall of the tarp as the bear family breathed in unison. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think our lives just changed in ways we can't yet understand." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. There are old stories in many cultures about people who form bonds with wild animals, bridges between worlds. My grandmother used to tell me that such connections were messages from the earth itself, reminding us of our place in the greater web of life. "I never thought I'd be that person," Noah said with a small laugh. "This morning, I was afraid to let my family anywhere near a wild bear. Now, I'm sitting here wondering if we have enough fish in the freezer to help her recover her strength." They fell silent, listening to the night sounds of the forest and the occasional soft chuffing from the bear shelter. Eventually, Marcus excused himself to get some rest, leaving Noah and Emma alone on the porch. "Do you regret it?" Emma asked, taking her husband's hand. "Getting involved?" Noah shook his head without hesitation. "I think we did exactly what we were supposed to do." He squeezed her hand gently. "I keep thinking about how Lily walked to the bear. Her first steps, Emma. It's like she was waiting for something important enough to walk for." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "Children see the world differently. They haven't learned our boundaries, our fears." She thought about Lily's fearless approach to the suffering bear. Maybe sometimes we need to see through their eyes. They sat together in comfortable silence until the chill drove them indoors. Before retiring to bed, they checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, one small hand curled around her stuffed bear toy that now seemed symbolic in a way it hadn't been before. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges," Noah whispered as they closed their daughter's door. "But I have a feeling this is just the beginning of something extraordinary." Dawn broke with a golden light that seemed to bless the unusual scene in the Harpers' yard. Noah woke early, drawn outside by an instinct he couldn't name. He found Hope already awake, watching the sunrise with those intelligent eyes while her cubs slept against her warm body. "Good morning," Noah said softly, keeping a respectful distance. "How are you feeling today?" The bear regarded him calmly, and Noah could have sworn he saw recognition in her gaze. He knew it was probably foolish to talk to a wild animal as though she could understand, but after yesterday's events nothing seemed impossible. The sound of tires on gravel announced an early visitor. Noah turned to see a familiar pickup truck approaching, Dale's truck. The hunter stepped out alone, without his rifle, carrying what appeared to be a large cooler. "Morning, Harper," Dale called, his voice subdued. "Brought something for your visitor." He set the cooler down and opened it, revealing several fresh fish. "Caught these at dawn. Figured she could use the protein, nursing those cubs and all." Noah was momentarily speechless at this gesture from the man who had been ready to shoot Hope just yesterday. "Thank you," he managed finally. "That's very thoughtful." Dale shrugged, not quite meeting Noah's eyes. "Been thinking a lot since yesterday about what your little girl did." He glanced toward the bear shelter. "Never seen anything like that in all my years in these woods. Makes a man reconsider some things." Before Noah could respond, the door of the cottage opened, and Emma emerged with Lily in her arms. The baby was fully awake and squirming with excitement, clearly eager to see the bears again. "Dale brought fish for Hope," Noah explained as Emma joined them, carefully keeping Lily at a safe distance from the cooler of raw fish. "That's kind of you," Emma said, genuine appreciation in her voice despite her initial wariness of the hunter. Dale nodded awkwardly, then reached into his truck and pulled out something else. A small, handcrafted wooden mobile with tiny carved bears dangling from it. "Made this last night," he said gruffly, holding it out to Emma. For the little one. Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about how she walked right up to that bear without a lick of fear. Emma accepted the gift with visible emotion. It's beautiful, Dale. Thank you. The hunter cleared his throat. Well, I should get going, but I told the fellas at the lodge about what happened, word spreading. You might get more visitors today. He hesitated. Not everyone understands what you're doing here, taking in a wild bear family. Some folks might not like it. We're working with the rangers, Noah assured him. Everything's above board. Dale nodded. Good. Well, if you need any help. He left the offer hanging, then climbed back into his truck with a final nod. As he drove away, Marcus emerged from the cottage, looking refreshed despite the unusual circumstances. Was that Dale? He asked, surprised. Noah nodded toward the cooler of fish. He brought breakfast for Hope. Marcus laughed softly. The power of transformation. Yesterday he wanted to kill her. Today he's bringing gifts. He approached the bear shelter carefully. Let's see how our patients are doing this morning. The next few hours brought a flurry of activity. Ranger Sullivan returned with a colleague and official supplies for monitoring the bear family. They set up a more permanent shelter, installed a wildlife camera to track Hope's movements and recovery, and established clear boundaries for human interaction. The goal is to support her recovery without creating dependence, Ranger Sullivan explained as they worked. She needs to maintain her wild instincts for when she returns to the forest. Throughout the morning, more neighbors arrived, some out of curiosity, others bearing gifts of food for the humans, or simply wanting to catch a glimpse of the Miracle Bear family. Word had indeed spread rapidly through their small community. By midday, the Harpers' yard had become something of an impromptu gathering place. Emma found herself explaining the situation repeatedly to visitors, while Noah worked with the rangers to ensure Hope and her cubs remained undisturbed by the increasing attention. Most remarkable of all was Hope's continued calm acceptance of the human presence around her. She seemed to understand that these people meant no harm to her or her cubs, and while she remained appropriately protective, she showed none of the aggression typically associated with mother bears. It's as though she's chosen to trust us, Ranger Sullivan observed with wonder. In all my years working with wildlife, I've never seen anything quite like this. The cubs, following their mother's example, grew increasingly curious about the humans who came and went. Brave, true to his name, ventured closest to the boundaries established by the rangers, sniffing the air and watching the strange two-legged creatures with evident fascination. Star remained more cautious but equally observant, while little Lily stayed close to Hope, mimicking her mother's calm demeanor. Throughout it all, baby Lily remained the most entranced by the bears. She had now mastered walking with surprising speed, motivated by her desire to be near the bear family. Emma and Noah had to maintain constant vigilance to prevent her from crossing the safety boundaries established by the rangers. She's bonded with them, Emma explained to a group of curious neighbors as she once again intercepted Lily's determined march toward the bears. It's as if she understands something about them that we don't. Children often see the world more clearly than adults, observed Mrs. Chen, Marcus's mother, who had arrived to bring lunch for her son. A respected elder in the community, her words carried weight. In many traditions, the bond between a child and a wild creature is considered sacred, a sign of special purpose. This comment sparked quiet conversations among the gathered neighbors about other local legends and stories, tales of special connections between people and the natural world that had been passed down through generations, but had somehow been forgotten in the rush of modern life. By late afternoon, what had begun as a frightening encounter with a wild animal had transformed into something like a community celebration of connection and compassion. Someone brought out a guitar, and soft music drifted across the yard. Children sat cross-legged at a safe distance from the bear shelter, watching with wide eyes as Hope occasionally emerged to stretch or tend to her cubs. "This is becoming something bigger than just helping one bear," Noah murmured to Emma as they watched their neighbors sharing food and stories. "It's like Hope has awakened something in all of us." Emma nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The fear that had initially gripped their community at the news of a bear in their midst had given way to something else. A collective sense of purpose, of stewardship, of reconnection with the wild world that surrounded their homes, but from which they had grown increasingly distant. As the afternoon lengthened into evening, Ranger Sullivan pulled the Harpers aside for a private conversation. "We've been on the phone with the Wildlife Department headquarters all day," she explained. "Your situation has attracted attention at the state level." Noah felt a flicker of concern. Good attention or bad? "Both," the ranger admitted. "Some officials are concerned about liability, about setting precedents for wildlife interaction. Others see a unique research and education opportunity." She hesitated. "There's talk of featuring Hope's story in our conservation program, using what's happening here to teach people about coexistence with wildlife." "What would that mean for Hope and her cubs?" Emma asked, instinctively glancing toward the bear shelter where Lily was sitting with Marcus, watching the cubs play. "It would mean more resources, more support for her recovery," Ranger Sullivan explained. "But also more scrutiny, more visitors, potentially media attention." Noah frowned. "Would that be good for them? For Hope?" The ranger sighed. "That's the question we're all asking. Wild animals aren't meant to be attractions or teaching tools, but in this case—" She glanced toward Hope, who was watching her cubs with evident contentment. "This is already such an unusual situation. If handled respectfully, Hope's story could help people understand bears differently, not as threats to be feared, but as intelligent creatures deserving of respect and protection." The Harpers exchanged looks, silently communicating in the way of couples who know each other deeply. "We want what's best for Hope and her cubs," Noah said finally. "If sharing her story helps protect other bears, helps people understand them better, maybe that's why she came here in the first place." As they discussed the possibilities, a commotion from the bear shelter drew their attention. Lily had somehow managed to slip past Marcus's watchful eye and was toddling determinedly toward the bears again. Before any adult could react, she had crossed the safety boundary and was standing directly before Hope and her cubs. Emma's heart leaped into her throat, and Noah moved with instinctive speed toward their daughter. But something made them both pause before they reached her. Hope, who had been resting, raised her massive head to acknowledge Lily's presence. Instead of showing aggression or protectiveness, the bear made a soft chuffing sound that seemed almost like a greeting. And then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, she gently nudged her cubs forward, as if deliberately introducing them to the human child. Brave was the first to approach, his small black nose twitching with curiosity as he sniffed Lily's extended hand. Star followed more hesitantly, staying slightly behind her bolder sibling. And finally, little Lily the cub wobbled forward to complete the circle of young ones. The human baby and the bear cubs regarded each other with mirrored curiosity. Creatures too young to have learned the boundaries that separated their species. Too innocent to know they were supposed to be enemies rather than friends. "Don't move," Ranger Sullivan whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of professional concern and personal awe. "Let's see what happens." What happened next would later be described by those present as nothing short of magical. Lily sat down directly in front of the cubs, and after a moment of mutual inspection, Brave tumbled playfully toward her, rolling onto his back in a gesture that any bear biologist would recognize as an invitation to play. Without hesitation, Lily giggled and reached out to gently touch the cub's fuzzy belly. Hope watched this interaction with alert but calm attention, making no move to separate her cubs from the human child. "She's allowing it," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She's actually allowing her cubs to interact with Lily." Emma moved slowly to kneel beside her daughter, knowing she should probably remove Lily from this unprecedented situation, but unable to bring herself to interrupt what was clearly a moment of profound connection. "Hi, Mama Bear," she said softly to Hope, acknowledging the mother-to-mother connection they shared. "Thank you for trusting us with your babies." Hope's intelligent eyes met Emma's, and in that moment, a wordless understanding seemed to pass between them. Two mothers from different worlds, each fiercely protective of their young, each recognizing something of themselves in the other. Noah joined them, kneeling beside his wife and daughter, completing the unusual circle of two families, one human, one bear, sharing a moment of connection that defied explanation or precedent. Around them, neighbors and rangers watched in reverent silence, witnesses to something that would change their understanding of the relationship between humans and wildlife forever. And as the evening sun cast long golden rays across this extraordinary scene, it illuminated not just a yard in a small town at the edge of a forest, but a new possibility, a world in which fear could give way to understanding, in which the wisdom of children could guide adults back to a connection with the natural world that had been lost but not forgotten. For in this moment, as a human baby played gently with bear cubs under the watchful eyes of both their mothers, ancient boundaries dissolved, and something new and hopeful took their place. A reminder that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from those too young to have learned to fear, and the purest compassion flows from hearts still open to all the possibilities of connection that the world has to offer. The unexpected gathering continued until sunset, when Ranger Sullivan gently suggested that everyone should leave to allow Hope and her cubs the quiet they needed. The neighbors departed reluctantly, each forever changed by what they had witnessed. Marcus returned to his own home after ensuring Hope was stable, promising to return in the morning. That night, the Harpers slept fitfully, their dreams filled with images of bears and boundaries dissolved. Noah woke several times to check on the shelter in their yard, drawn by an inexplicable need to ensure Hope and her cubs were safe. Each time, he found the mother bear awake and watchful, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight, as if she too was standing guard over both their families. Dawn brought unexpected news. Emma was preparing breakfast when her phone rang, a local number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harper, this is Jennifer Reeves from the Mountain View Gazette." The voice was brisk, professional. "We've heard about the remarkable situation at your home with the Bear family. Would you be willing to give a statement or perhaps allow a photographer?" Emma ended the call, her heart racing. "Noah," she called, "the press has already found out." Noah looked up from where he was helping Lily with her cereal, concern etching lines on his face. "That was fast. Dale warned us word was spreading, but I didn't expect—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Through the window, they could see an unfamiliar car in their driveway, sleek, expensive, clearly not local. Noah opened the door to find a well-dressed man holding out a business card. "Mr. Harper, I'm David Mercer, executive producer at the Wildlife Network. We've heard about what's happening here, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of documenting this extraordinary story." Before Noah could respond, another vehicle pulled up, a van with the logo of a national news channel emblazoned on its side, and behind it, more cars were turning onto their road. "Noah," Emma said, her voice tight with anxiety as she peered out the window. "They're coming from everywhere." The peaceful sanctuary they had created for Hope and her cubs was suddenly under threat, not from hunters or predators, but from the relentless curiosity of the wider world. Noah felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for his own family, but for the bears who had entrusted themselves to their care. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer," he said firmly, "but this isn't the right time. Hope, the mother bear, is still recovering. She needs peace and quiet, not cameras and crews." The producer looked disappointed, but handed Noah his card anyway. "Think about it. This could be an opportunity to share an important message about conservation, about coexistence with wildlife. People need these stories." As Noah closed the door, his phone buzzed with text messages from neighbors, warning that more reporters and even some curious locals were heading their way. The tranquil morning had turned chaotic before it had properly begun. "What are we going to do?" Emma asked, lifting Lily into her arms as if to shield her from the coming intrusion. "Hope isn't ready for this kind of attention." Before Noah could answer, Ranger Sullivan's truck pulled up, followed by 2 more official vehicles. The ranger approached their door with purposeful strides, her expression grave. "I was afraid of this," she said when Noah opened the door. "News travels fast, especially news this extraordinary." She glanced at the growing number of vehicles on the road. "We need to establish a perimeter before this gets out of hand." With remarkable efficiency, the rangers set up barriers at the end of the driveway, establishing a no-entry zone around the Harper property. Signs were posted explaining that a wildlife rehabilitation situation was in progress and that unauthorized entry was prohibited. A young ranger was stationed at the driveway entrance to politely but firmly turn away curious onlookers and persistent media. But the boundaries could not keep out the drones that soon appeared, hovering over the property like mechanical insects, their cameras aimed at the bear shelter. Hope grew visibly agitated as the first drone buzzed overhead, gathering her cubs close and glancing around warily. "This is stressing her," Marcus observed when he arrived, fighting his way through the growing crowd at the perimeter. "The noise, the unfamiliar presence of so many humans, it's too much too soon." Noah watched with growing anger as Hope retreated further under the shelter, her earlier calm replaced by the wariness any wild animal would show when surrounded by potential threats. The beautiful trust that had been established was fraying under the pressure of human curiosity and technological intrusion. "Enough," he said finally, his decision crystallizing. He turned to Ranger Sullivan. "This isn't right. Hope didn't come here to become a spectacle. She came for help, for a safe place to have her cubs." He took a deep breath. "We need to move them." The ranger nodded, understanding immediately. "I agree, but where? The rehabilitation center's 2 hours away, and moving her now with newborn cubs is risky." It was Emma who offered the solution. "My parents' cabin," she said suddenly, "on the North Ridge. It's remote, accessible only by a private road. No one would find them there." Ranger Sullivan considered this. "That could work, but we'd need to move quickly before she becomes too stressed. And we'd need a specialized transport vehicle for a bear and cubs." "I know someone," Marcus offered, "a colleague who works with the zoo in Capital City. They have transport equipment they use for relocating injured wildlife. I could make a call." As they formulated their plan, Lily watched from Emma's arms, her small face solemn, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. When Emma carried her past the window that overlooked the bear shelter, Lily reached out one small hand toward Hope, her eyes filling with tears. "Sad," she said clearly, the simple observation piercing her parents' hearts with its accuracy. "We're going to help her, sweetheart," Emma promised, her own eyes damp. "We're going to take Hope and her babies somewhere safe." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Marcus's colleague arrived with a specialized transport crate, large enough for Hope and her cubs. Ranger Sullivan coordinated with her team to create a diversion at the front of the property, while they prepared to move the bears out through the back, using a service road that connected to the forest trail. The most delicate part would be coaxing Hope into the transport crate, a potentially dangerous task with any wild animal, but especially with a mother bear, protecting her cubs. Everyone was prepared for resistance, for the natural fear and aggression a wild creature might show when cornered. What no one was prepared for was Lily's intervention. As the adults debated the safest approach, Lily slipped from Emma's grasp during a moment of distraction. Before anyone could stop her, she had toddled directly to the bear shelter, approaching Hope with the same fearless trust she had shown from the beginning. "Lily, no," Emma cried, lunging forward only to be held back by Noah, who recognized something important was unfolding. "Wait," he whispered, "look at Hope." The mother bear had risen to her full height at Lily's approach, an imposing figure that should have terrified any sensible human. But instead of showing aggression, she lowered her massive head to the level of the human child, their eyes meeting in a moment of communication beyond words. Lily reached out one tiny hand and placed it gently on Hope's nose, much as she had done during their first encounter. Then, with deliberate movements, she turned and toddled toward the transport crate, pausing at its entrance to look back at the bear as if saying, "Follow me." A collective breath was held by every adult present. Ranger Sullivan had her tranquilizer gun ready, but kept it lowered, watching with professional astonishment as an unprecedented scene unfolded. Hope gathered her cubs, nudging them forward with gentle movements, and followed Lily to the crate. She paused at the entrance, her intelligent eyes surveying the human-made container with evident suspicion. But when Lily patted the edge of the crate with her small hand, Hope made her decision. With careful, deliberate movements, she guided her cubs into the transport container. "I've never seen anything like this in my entire career," Ranger Sullivan whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's as if they're communicating on some level we can't access." Once Hope and her cubs were settled in the crate, Lily allowed her father to finally lift her away, though she kept her solemn gaze fixed on her wild friends as the door was secured. The bear family would be comfortable, but contained for the journey to their new sanctuary. The move was executed with military precision. While curious onlookers and media remained focused on the front of the property, the transport vehicle slipped out the back way, following the service road into the forest where it could connect with the main highway far from prying eyes. The Harpers followed in their own vehicle, with Lily secured in her car seat, but straining to keep sight of the transport ahead of them. The journey to Emma's parents' cabin took nearly 3 hours, following back roads and forest service paths to avoid attention. The cabin itself was perfect, a rustic structure set in a clearing surrounded by dense forest, with a stream running nearby and no neighbors for miles. Emma's parents had used it primarily as a hunting retreat in years past, but had visited less frequently as they aged. It had stood empty for nearly a year. "This is ideal," Ranger Sullivan said as they surveyed the property. "Natural water source, abundant food in the forest, minimal human contact." She turned to Noah and Emma. "Your bear family couldn't ask for a better temporary home." The transport crate was positioned at the edge of the clearing, its door facing the forest to give Hope a clear escape route if she chose it. Everyone retreated to the cabin porch, maintaining a respectful distance as Marcus prepared to open the crate remotely. "Once she's released, we should minimize contact," the ranger advised. The goal is to let her recover in peace, to gradually return to her natural behaviors without human interference. Noah nodded, though he felt an unexpected pang at the thought of Hope and her cubs disappearing into the forest, perhaps never to be seen again. In just 2 days, these wild creatures had changed his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. Emma seemed to read his thoughts. "It's the right thing," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "They belong to the wild, not to us." Lily, however, had other ideas. As Marcus prepared to open the crate door, she began to fuss in Emma's arms, reaching toward the bears with increasing desperation. "Bah! My bah!" she cried, tears streaming down her round cheeks. "Lily bah!" Her parents exchanged worried glances, recognizing the depth of connection their daughter felt with the bear family. "How do we explain to her that they have to go?" Emma whispered, her heart breaking for her child's first experience of loss. But once again, hope defied their expectations. When the crate door slid open, she emerged cautiously, her cubs following close behind. She surveyed the new territory with alert senses, cataloging scents and sounds. The deep forest beckoned just beyond the clearing, a perfect habitat for a bear family, rich with food and shelter possibilities. Yet, instead of immediately retreating into the woods, Hope paused. She turned her massive head toward the cabin porch where the humans watched, her gaze finding Lily with unerring accuracy. The mother bear made a soft chuffing sound, a call that carried clearly across the clearing. Lily responded immediately, squirming in Emma's arms with renewed determination. "Bah! Down! See bah! Exclamation mark!" After a moment of hesitation and a look from Ranger Sullivan that conveyed both professional caution and human understanding, Emma carefully set Lily on her feet at the bottom of the porch steps. Noah moved to stand close behind his daughter, ready to snatch her to safety if needed. But safety was never in question. Lily toddled across the clearing with the confidence of someone approaching a beloved friend. Hope waited patiently, her cubs peeking curiously from behind her massive form. When Lily reached the bear family, she stopped at a respectful distance, an instinctive courtesy that no one had taught her. Hope lowered her head, and bear and child regarded each other in a moment of connection that transcended species barriers. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to every human eye, Hope gently nudged her smallest cub forward. Little Lily the cub wobbled toward human Lily, the two youngsters meeting in a moment of perfect innocence. The human baby reached out to touch the bear cub's soft fur, and the cub responded by playfully batting at Lily's outstretched fingers with a velvet paw. "It's a goodbye," Marcus whispered, understanding dawning. Hope is allowing them to say goodbye. After a few precious moments of this unlikely interaction, Hope made another soft sound, gathering her cubs close. With a final look at the assembled humans, a look that somehow conveyed both gratitude and dignity, she turned and led her family toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, she paused one last time, looking back at Lily, who stood watching, her small hand raised in an unknowing farewell. Then the bear family disappeared into the dappled shadows of the ancient forest, returning to the wild world where they belonged. Lily watched them go with solemn acceptance, making no attempt to follow. When Noah lifted her into his arms, she rested her head against his shoulder with a small sigh, as if understanding that some connections, however profound, were not meant to be permanent. "That was a sacred moment," Ranger Sullivan said quietly as they walked back to the cabin. "In 25 years working with wildlife, I've never witnessed anything like the connection between your daughter and that bear." Emma nodded, still too overcome with emotion to speak. The ranger continued, her voice thoughtful. There are indigenous stories about children with special connections to certain animals. Spirit bonds, they called them. I always thought they were just legends. The Harpers spent that night in the cabin, allowing Lily to adjust gradually to the bear's absence. They half expected to find Hope and her cubs still lingering at the forest edge in the morning, but dawn revealed an empty clearing. The bear family had truly returned to the wild. "I'll set up motion-activated cameras around the perimeter," Ranger Sullivan offered over breakfast. "Just to monitor them from a distance, make sure they're adapting well. But I suspect Hope will be fine. She's proven herself remarkably resourceful." As they prepared to return to their home, each of the Harpers felt the weight of the experience they had shared, an encounter that had changed them in ways both subtle and profound. The media frenzy would eventually die down, the curious onlookers would find new distractions, but the memory of those 3 extraordinary days would remain with them forever. 6 months passed. Summer turned to autumn, painting the forest in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. The media storm around the Miracle Bear story had indeed faded, though the Harpers still occasionally received letters from people touched by the story that had eventually made national news despite their efforts at privacy. Lily had continued to develop at an astonishing pace, her vocabulary expanding daily, though she still used "bah" when referring to bears in the picture books Noah read to her each night. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, Emma would catch their daughter staring into the forest with a look of expectancy, as if waiting for old friends to emerge from the trees. The Rangers' cameras had captured occasional glimpses of Hope and her growing cubs in the months following their release. The bear family appeared to be thriving in the wild, the cubs gaining size and independence under their mother's watchful guidance. By mutual agreement, the exact location of their territory remained a closely guarded secret, known only to the Harpers, Marcus, and the Rangers directly involved in monitoring them. As the first snow of winter dusted the landscape, the Harpers prepared for a quiet holiday season. Their experience had changed them in subtle ways. Noah had become involved in local conservation efforts, while Emma had begun writing a children's book about a baby who befriends a bear, hoping to capture the magic of Lily's extraordinary connection for other children. The unexpected knock came late on a snowy afternoon. Emma opened the door to find Ranger Sullivan stamping snow from her boots, her expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "You need to see this," she said without preamble, holding out her tablet. "One of our remote cameras captured it yesterday." The Harpers gathered around the screen, unsure what to expect. The video showed a snow-covered clearing, the area around Emma's parents' cabin, they realized. At first, the frame appeared empty except for gently falling snow. Then, movement at the edge of the clearing caught their attention. Hope emerged from the trees, her coat thicker for winter, her 3 cubs, now nearly half her size, following close behind. The bear family moved with purpose across the snowy ground, approaching the cabin porch with familiar ease. Hope paused at the steps, looking directly at the camera as if aware of being observed. Then, with deliberate movements, she rose onto her hind legs, not in a gesture of aggression, but almost like a greeting. Bears don't typically return to human habitations once they've readapted to the wild, Ranger Sullivan explained, her voice reflecting her professional amazement. And they certainly don't approach structures this deliberately unless they're seeking food. But there's no food source there. The cabin's been empty for months. "She came back," Noah said softly, understanding dawning. "She remembered." The video continued, showing Hope and her cubs exploring the area around the cabin, investigating the porch where the humans had sat, watching their departure months earlier. The bears showed no signs of stress or fear, only a curious familiarity with the human space. Most remarkably, before departing, Hope guided her cubs to the exact spot where Lily had stood to say goodbye. The mother bear paused there, her massive head lowered as if in remembrance, before leading her family back into the protective embrace of the forest. "I've shown this to several wildlife biologists," Ranger Sullivan said as the video ended. "None of them can explain it in conventional terms. Bears have excellent memories, especially for locations associated with food or safety, but this—" she shook her head in wonder. "This suggests something more, a deliberate revisiting of a place of connection, perhaps even a kind of commemoration." Emma looked down at Lily, who had watched the video with rapt attention. "What do you think, sweetheart? Was Hope coming to say hello?" Lily nodded solemnly, her understanding seemingly beyond her years. "Buh members," she said simply. "Buh family." That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, Noah and Emma sat by their fireplace, watching the snow fall outside their window. The forest beyond their yard seemed different now, not a mysterious other world, but a continuation of their own, a place where boundaries between species could dissolve in moments of true connection. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Emma asked, leaning against Noah's shoulder. He considered this, watching the dancing flames that reminded him of another winter long ago when his own grandfather had taught him about respecting the wild creatures that shared their mountain home. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I think they've changed us forever." Emma nodded, understanding. Lily will grow up seeing the world differently because of Hope. She'll know that the lines we draw between human and wild are more permeable than we think. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the landscape in pristine white. Somewhere in the vast forest, a bear family settled into a winter den, their connection to a human family an impossible bridge across ancient divides. And in her warm bed, a human child dreamed of her bear friends, her innocent heart holding space for a bond that defied explanation but existed nonetheless. A reminder that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from what we learn, but from what we never forget to see. 3 years later, the Harper family had grown. Twins Joshua and Olivia had joined the family, bringing new joy and inevitable chaos to their home at the edge of the forest. Lily, now a precocious 4-year-old, had appointed herself official helper and protector of her younger siblings, a role she approached with solemn dedication. The bear encounter had faded into family legend, a story told and retold on quiet evenings, how baby Lily had formed an extraordinary bond with a mother bear and her cubs, how she had taken her first steps to approach the wild creature when adults hung back in fear. The ranger's cameras had occasionally captured glimpses of Hope and her cubs in the years since, but the bear family had maintained their distance, returning to the natural rhythms of wild life. Until the day of the fire. It began like many summer wildfires in the mountains, a lightning strike, a patch of drought-dry forest, and winds that carried embers from treetop to treetop with terrifying speed. Within hours, what had been a manageable Forest Service response became a full evacuation order for the communities at the forest edge. Noah had been in town when the evacuation order came through. He raced home to find Emma already loading the twins into their car seat, her movements quick but controlled. "Where's Lily?" he asked immediately, scanning the yard. "She was just on the porch," Emma replied, securing Olivia's straps. "Lily, time to go, honey." But there was no answer. Noah rushed through the house, checking each room with growing panic. "Lily," he called, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. "Lily!" Emma joined the search, the twins temporarily secure in their car seats. "She wouldn't have gone into the forest," she said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. She knows the rules. But even as she spoke, they both recognized the awful possibility. The evacuation order had come suddenly, with sirens and emergency vehicles racing past their property. Lily, always sensitive to animals, might have thought of the creatures who had no warning, no evacuation plan. "The bears," Noah said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. She might have gone to find Hope. It was a child's logic, impossible, improbable. But in that moment, they both knew it was exactly what their daughter might have done. Lily, who still spoke of her bear friends with unwavering certainty that they remembered her, who still insisted on leaving offerings of berries at the forest edge on special occasions. Noah made an instant decision. "Take the twins to the evacuation center. I'll find Lily." Emma's face showed her terror at the thought of separation, but she nodded grimly. "The Rangers will be on the East Access Road. Find them first. They'll have equipment, radios." Within minutes, Emma was driving toward safety with the twins, while Noah grabbed a backpack of emergency supplies and headed toward the forest. The smoke was thickening already, the fire moving faster than predicted. In the distance, he could hear the distinctive sound of water bombers approaching, aircraft that would drop fire retardant in an attempt to slow the blaze's advance. The East Access Road was empty when Noah reached it. The Rangers already moved to more urgent locations, perhaps. He was on his own. Taking a deep breath of the increasingly acrid air, he plunged into the forest, calling his daughter's name. Time became meaningless as he pushed deeper into the woods, following the faint trails he had walked with Lily on countless father-daughter explorations. The smoke grew thicker, making his eyes water and his lungs burn. In the distance, he could hear the approaching roar of the fire, a sound like a freight train bearing down without mercy. "Lily!" he shouted, until his voice grew hoarse. "Lily, where are you?" The crack of a breaking branch froze him in place. Through the smoke-filtered light, Noah made out a massive shape moving through the trees ahead. A shape he recognized instantly despite the years that had passed. Hope had grown larger, her powerful form now that of a mature female black bear in her prime. She stopped when she saw Noah, her intelligent eyes regarding him across the clearing. There was no fear in her posture, no aggression, only a strange alertness, an awareness that seemed to transcend typical animal behavior. "Hope," Noah said, his voice breaking with a mixture of wonder and desperation. "I'm looking for Lily. Have you seen her?" It was absurd to ask a wild animal for help, yet something compelled him to speak to Hope as if she might understand. And perhaps, in some way beyond human comprehension, she did. For, after a moment of stillness, the bear turned and moved deeper into the forest, pausing to look back at Noah as if expecting him to follow. Driven by instinct and desperate hope, Noah followed the bear through the thickening smoke. They moved away from the fire's advance, following a path that seemed intentional rather than random flight. After what felt like hours but was perhaps only 20 minutes, Hope led him to a small grove nestled against a rocky outcropping. There, curled in a small hollow at the base of the rocks, was Lily. And beside her, protectively close, were 3 half-grown bears. Hope's cubs, now in their 4th year, nearly ready for independence but still recognizable as the tiny cubs who had once played with a human baby in a yard at the edge of the forest. "Daddy!" Lily cried when she saw him, scrambling to her feet. "I came to help the bears get away from the fire, but I got lost, and then Hope found me." Her voice held no fear, only the matter-of-fact certainty of a child who had never doubted her connection to these wild creatures. Noah gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her with a fierce relief that made words impossible for several moments. When he could finally speak, he looked up at Hope, who stood watching the reunion with what could only be described as thoughtful attention. "Thank you," he said simply, the words wholly inadequate for what this wild creature had done. Hope made a soft chuffing sound, then gathered her nearly grown cubs with subtle movements. The bear family began to move further away from the approaching fire, following what Noah realized was the path to a river that would offer some protection from the blaze. "Can we go with them, Daddy?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with concern for her bear friends. They know the safe way. In that moment of crisis, with the rational world already turned upside down by fire and smoke and impossible reunions, Noah made a decision that defied conventional wisdom, but felt utterly right. "Yes," he said, setting Lily on her feet but keeping a firm hold of her hand. "We'll follow Hope." And so, in a scene that would have defied belief had anyone witnessed it, a human father and daughter followed a bear family through the burning forest, trusting the wild creature's instincts to lead them to safety. Hope moved with purpose, occasionally pausing to ensure her unusual charges were keeping pace, her cubs ranging ahead to scout the clearest path through the thickening smoke. They reached the river as the day was fading, the water a silvery ribbon cutting through the forest, offering a natural firebreak that might slow the blaze. On the far bank, Noah spotted movement. Rangers and firefighters establishing a control line, preparing to make their stand against the advancing flames. "There's help," he told Lily, pointing to the human figures. "We need to cross the river and join them." But before they could approach the water's edge, Hope made a low sound. Not quite a growl, but a clear warning. She moved to block their path, her massive body positioned between the humans and the river. "What is it, girl?" Noah asked, scanning the area for danger. Then he saw it. The current running swift and deep through the center of the river, far too powerful for safe crossing, especially with a child. The rangers had equipment and training for such crossings. He and Lily did not. Hope turned, leading them along the riverbank instead, following its course downstream where Noah knew it widened and grew shallower. The bear family moved with increased urgency now, the fire's glow visible through the trees behind them, its roar growing louder by the minute. After nearly a mile, they reached a section where the river spread out into a broader, calmer flow. Here, Hope led her cubs into the water without hesitation, their powerful bodies cutting easily through the current. On the far bank they paused, looking back at Noah and Lily with unmistakable expectation. "We have to cross here," Noah told his daughter, kneeling to look her in the eyes. "I'm going to carry you, and you need to hold tight to my neck. Can you do that?" Lily nodded solemnly, her trust absolute. "Hope is showing us the safe way," she said, with the same certainty she brought to all her declarations about her bear friends. Noah lifted her onto his back, securing her arms around his neck, and waded carefully into the river. The water was cold and pushed against his legs with surprising force, but here, at least, it remained below his waist. Step by careful step, he made his way across, constantly testing his footing on the rocky riverbed. From the far bank, Hope watched their crossing, her attention unwavering. When they finally reached the shallows on the other side, the mother bear made a soft sound that seemed almost like approval before turning to continue her journey with her cubs, moving parallel to the fire line but deeper into the unburned forest. "Goodbye, Hope," Lily called after the retreating bears. "Goodbye, Brave and Star and little Lily." Hope paused at the forest edge, her massive head turning back toward the human child. For a moment, bear and child regarded each other across the distance, a connection spanning years and defying explanation. Then Hope raised her head in what seemed an unmistakable farewell gesture, before disappearing into the sheltering trees with her family. Noah carried Lily toward the ranger station that was now visible through the trees, emergency lights flashing against the darkening sky. They were spotted within minutes, a search team rushing to meet them with blankets and medical kits. Harper? Noah Harper? A ranger he didn't recognize approached with astonishment. "We've had search teams looking for you and your daughter for hours. How did you get across the river? The current's too dangerous for crossing without equipment." Noah wrapped a blanket around Lily's shoulders, considering how to answer. The truth seemed impossible, yet anything else would be a lie. "We had help," he said finally, "from an old friend." Later, reunited with Emma and the twins at the evacuation center, Noah told the full story of their rescue, how Hope had found Lily lost in the forest, how the Bear family had led them to safety, finding a crossing point that experienced rangers had deemed too dangerous to attempt. "She remembered," Emma whispered, holding Lily close as their daughter slept, exhausted from her ordeal. "After all these years, she remembered you both." "More than remembered," Noah replied thoughtfully. "She recognized Lily was in danger and deliberately brought her to a place where I could find her. Then led us both to safety." He shook his head in wonder. "That goes beyond memory. That's something else entirely." In the days that followed, as firefighters contained the blaze and families began returning to assess the damage, Noah found himself speaking with a wildlife biologist who had been called in to evaluate the fire's impact on local bear populations. Without revealing specific locations, Noah shared the story of Hope and her cubs, of the extraordinary connection that had formed years ago between a human baby and a mother bear, and of the even more remarkable rescue during the fire. He expected skepticism, perhaps even dismissal of his account as the product of stress and smoke inhalation. Instead, the biologist listened with thoughtful attention, taking careful notes. "There have been documented cases of unusual interspecies behaviors," she said when Noah finished. "Dolphins protecting swimmers from sharks, elephants helping injured humans. Science tends to dismiss these as anomalies or coincidences because they don't fit neatly into our understanding of animal behavior." She smiled slightly. "But perhaps our understanding is what needs expanding, not the other way around." She asked permission to include Noah's account in her research, anonymized to protect both the Harper family and Hope from unwanted attention. "These stories matter," she explained. "They remind us that the boundaries we draw between species are human constructs, not absolute truths." Life gradually returned to normal for the Harper family. Their home had been spared the worst of the fire, requiring only minor repairs from smoke damage. The forest would take longer to heal, with blackened areas standing in stark contrast to the patches that had escaped the flames. Lily, now recognized as something of a local celebrity for her bear adventure, took her new status in stride. She spoke matter-of-factly about Hope and her cubs to anyone who would listen, her absolute certainty in their connection unshaken by adult skepticism or the passage of time. As spring returned to the mountain, bringing new growth to the fire-scarred forest, Noah began taking Lily on short hikes to monitor the recovery. They cataloged new sprouts pushing through blackened soil, celebrated the return of wildlife to areas that had seemed desolate just months before. On one such expedition, they ventured closer to the river than usual, following the same path they had taken with Hope during the fire. The forest was quieter here, the birdsong more subdued, the recovery more tentative. "Daddy, look," Lily said suddenly, pointing to a fallen log beside the trail. "Bear sign." Noah looked where she indicated, impressed by his daughter's developing tracking skills. Sure enough, there were claw marks on the log, fresh ones by the look of them. A bear had marked this territory recently. As they continued their walk, more signs appeared. Tracks in soft mud, hair caught on tree bark, evidence of foraging. Noah found himself scanning the forest with increasing alertness, a mixture of hope and caution quickening his steps. They reached a small clearing beside a tributary of the main river, a peaceful spot where the sunlight dappled the new growth with gold. Lily ran ahead, then stopped so suddenly that Noah nearly collided with her. On the opposite side of the clearing stood a massive black bear, her coat gleaming in the spring sunlight. Behind her, 3 younger bears foraged among the new growth, their movements confident and purposeful. "Hope," Lily breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. The mother bear's head lifted at the sound, her keen senses registering their presence immediately. For a long moment, human and bear regarded each other across the clearing, not as threats, not as predator and prey, but as old friends reunited in